The world is holding its breath as tensions continue to skyrocket in the Middle East. Multiple countries have urged Iran and Israel to not escalate the conflict any further. Will better sense prevail? That remains the big question. Israel has vowed to exact a price from Iran after an unprecedented war in Gaza. Israel's military says 99% of more than 300 projectiles launched by Iran were intercepted by Israel and its partners. Iran fired 170 drones, more than 30 cruise missiles, and more than 120 ballistic missiles, according to the Israeli military. Several ballistic missiles reached Israeli territory but only caused minor damage to an airbase. Iran says this was retaliation for a strike on its diplomatic compound in Syria on the 1st of April that left several Iranians, including top military generals, dead. While Israeli President Isaac Herzog has said the country is not seeking war and balance is needed in the situation, Netanyahu's war cabinet reportedly wants retribution at a time and place of its choosing. Significantly, US President Joe Biden and members of his national security team have made it clear that the US would not participate in any offensive action against Iran. Israel's war cabinet seems determined to act, but has yet to decide on the timing and scope. The threat of open warfare erupting between the arch Middle East foes and dragging in the United States has put the region on edge, triggering calls for restraint from global powers and Arab nations to avoid further escalation. President Emmanuel Macron said France would do everything possible to avoid a regional conflagration. David Cameron, the UK Foreign Secretary, has said Iran's attack almost entirely failed and Israel should be smart and tough in its reaction. He said Israel must think with its head, not heart. Cameron also insists that the UK's efforts are focused on ensuring a pause in fighting and getting more aid into Gaza. The UN continues to warn that famine is imminent in parts of Gaza. Germany's foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, has called for calm in the region. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has warned Tehran against further escalation. Scholz said the attack is a serious escalation of the situation and is in no way acceptable, understandable, or tolerable. The Gulf states are pushing to stop a full-blown regional war, fearing that new escalation could put them on the front lines of a conflagration and ruin plans to reshape the region. G7 leaders have said they are ready to take further measures in response to destabilizing an attack. IDF spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said, "Together, we thwarted Iran's attack. This was the first time that such a coalition worked together against the threat of Iran and its proxies in the Middle East." Turkish, Jordanian and Iraqi officials have said that Iran gave wide notice days before its drone and missile attack on Israel. But US officials say Tehran did not warn Washington and that it was aiming to cause significant damage, but actually failed to do so in the end. President Biden told the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in his phone call on Sunday that he should consider what happened the previous night a win, because Iran's attacks had been largely unsuccessful and demonstrated Israel's superior military capability. John Kirby, the White House National Security spokesperson, said the ability to prevent widespread damage was a demonstration of Israel's military superiority and proof that Iran was not the military power that it claimed to be. He added, this was an incredible success, proving Israel's military superiority and just as critically their diplomatic superiority, that they have friends in the region and around the world that are willing to help them. While stating that Israel is not looking for an escalation, Israeli President Isaac Herzog said, "We are considering it all. We're acting cool-headedly and lucidly. I think we're operating in a very focused way, in a responsible way, and I'm sure there will be a decision accordingly that will make sure that we protect and defend the people of Israel." Israel and Iran's United Nations ambassadors condemned each other's actions during Sunday's UN Security Council emergency session called to address Iran's attack on Israel. Israel's UN ambassador Gilad Erdan said Iran must be stopped before it drives the world to a point of no return, to a regional war that can escalate to a world war. He's called upon the Security Council to impose all available sanctions on Iran. Erdogan accused Iran of seeking world domination and said its attack proved that Tehran cares neither for Islam nor for Muslims, before pulling out a tablet to show a video of Israel intercepting Iranian drones just above Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque. Erdogan also called on the Security Council to designate the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terror organization. Action must be taken now, not for Israel's sake, not for the region's sake, but for the world's sake. Stop Iran today, he said. Iran's UN ambassador, Amir Saeed Iravani, said his country's operation was entirely in the exercise of Iran's inherent right to self-defense, as outlined in Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations and recognized by international law. He said Iran is never seeking to contribute to the spillover of the conflict in the region, nor does it want to escalate or spread tension to the entire region. Iravani added Iran has no intention of engaging in conflict with the United States in the region, but warned that Iran will use its inherent right to respond proportionately should the US initiate a military operation against Iran, its citizens, or its security. Meanwhile, after Indian Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar's call to his Iranian counterpart, Iran has said it will allow Indian officials to meet the 17 Indian crew on the Israeli-affiliated container ship seized by Iran in the Strait of Hormuz. India has called on Iran to release the 17 Indian crew members. On Saturday, Iran's Revolutionary Guard seized this Israeli-linked container ship, MSC Ares, in a helicopter operation near the Strait of Hormuz. The Mediterranean shipping company said there were 25 crew members on board. So what should we expect next? As I said at the start of the show, the world is watching with bated breath. Nobody wants to see this turn into a wider regional conflagration. Nobody wants to see an escalation. But what really happens next on the ground is anybody's guess. Let's understand this with our panel of experts. Joining me on Global Lens tonight, Ambassador Gauri Shankar Gupta, former Indian diplomat, Colonel Rajiv Agrawal, Assistant Director at the IDSA, Professor Scott Lucas, Foreign Affairs expert joining us live from Ireland, and Lev Aaron, our Israeli friend, a columnist and a journalist. Thanks to all of you for joining me on Global Lens. Ambassador Gauri Shankar Gupta, let me start with you, sir. Now, you know, ideally, what's happened should offer a perfect point of de-escalation to both sides. Why do I say that? Because on the one hand, Israel is claiming victory because 99% of the drones and missiles were intercepted and struck down. Very little damage caused to just one air base. US President Joe Biden has said that it was a spectacularly unsuccessful attack that was launched by Iran, and it proves Israel's military superiority to that country. On the other hand, Iran can draw satisfaction from the fact that it has inflicted retribution on Israel for the attack on its embassy in Syria. Ideally, this should be an off-ramp for the two countries who can tell themselves and each other that we've settled our scores, we're now even. So let's all just think with calm, cool heads and not allow this to escalate any further. But unfortunately, we do not live in an ideal world. The question is, where do you see it going from here? Because, you know, there are all sorts of statements that are being made. Iran has said if Israel retaliates, it'll have to pay a very heavy price. The Israeli War Cabinet has said we will exact a price from Iran at a time and place of our choosing. The Israeli president says we are not looking for an escalation. The US president tells Israel we are not going to participate in a counteroffensive. Where do you see this going, sir?
First of all, thank you very much, Neha, for inviting me for this debate. We are working today. Now, after October 7 attack on Israel by Hamas, this is the first time that we are, seeing a very, very large escalation, which can trigger totally unpredictable consequences. Now, you are right in saying that the both sides can draw satisfaction. Iran can say that we have retaliated against the attack on our mission in Syria, and Israel can say that okay, we could not, or we protected all our territory. There was no damage done because of these missiles. I wish that prevails, but it is not that simple. There are a variety of factors. First of all, Israel is not going to take it lying. Israel realizes that this is the first time Iran has directly attacked Israel from its own soil. So far, the attacks have been through what we call shadow players, or the non-state players.
The proxies,
Yeah,
yes.
whether it is Houthi or whether it is Hezbollah or some other organizations, but it was never direct attack from Iran on Israel. This is the first time that the direct attack has been done, and therefore Israel is not going to stay quiet. Secondly, the internal political situation for the Prime Minister of Israel is also very delicate. He is already, facing internal turmoil, and his exit is not that far. So he wants to retain his popularity through one mean or the other. So that is another reason. On the other hand, Iran is facing, what we call international sanctions, and they are also pursuing the goal of nuclearization. In addition to that, players like Turkey, players like Syria, they are also having their role. So its situation is very complicated. I hope that Israel does not take action in a haste, though they have said that they will do it according to their own timings and in their own manner, because at this moment the situation can go out of control, and it can have unpredictable consequences, including a nuclear war. And this can add to the new fire. We already have two, very regions which are tension driven.
Yes.
One is, of course, Ukrainian and Russian conflict, which is going on for the last 2 years.
Yes.
And which is also draining a lot of resources and creating a lot of conflict in the world.
It has had
In
huge
addition, South
international
China Sea is also-
ramifications. Then there is the Israel-Hamas war, and now suddenly you have rising tensions between Iran and Israel. And while Iran may not admit it, but many do believe that it does possess nuclear capabilities. Therefore, you're absolutely right.
Absolutely.
The world cannot afford a further escalation of tensions between these two countries. The world needs to come together to put a stop to this. Let me go across to...
So we have to, we have to work
Sir,
for
I'll come back to
calm.
you. I'll come back to you in just a moment, because Professor Scott Lucas will have to leave in a few moments. So I need to go across to him. Professor Lucas, like I said at the start of the show, I mean, ideally the two sides should just call it quits now, saying we are even. Israel presumably attacks the Iranian diplomatic compound in Syria. Iran vows revenge. Iran launches these missile and drone attacks on Israel. It has inflicted retribution. Israel says it thwarted that attempt, so it has achieved a spectacular success while inflicting a major defeat or failure on Iran. In some ways, both sides can claim victory. In some ways, it's a win-win because very little damage has been caused. Thank God for small mercies. But the question is, will Israel stop here? Because even as the Israeli president says we're not looking for an escalation, you have the far-right government headed by Netanyahu saying we're going to exact a price for this from Iran at a time and place of our choosing. And the ambassador on the panel seems to think Israel is not going to take this lying down. Well, Biden has said, don't count on our support. We're not going to participate in a counter-offensive. Where does this end?
Well, I think we have to hold our breaths, as you say in the introduction. But maybe we can breathe a bit easier for this reason. Let me go step by step. Iran did not pursue this operation with the priority of inflicting significant damage on Israel. Now, that might sound strange, given that it's more than 320 drones and missiles that were used. But Iran telegraphed the operation. They told their neighbors days in advance it was going to take place. And of course, if they told their neighbors could then let the US know, and then Israel would know. In other words, the US, Israel's other partners knew the attack was coming. They knew the launch sites from where it was coming. And that's why they were able to intercept almost all of the drones and missiles that were fired. As you noted, there was only minor damage to 2 Israeli air bases in the Negev desert because the Iranians deliberately fired on sparsely populated areas to avoid causing mass casualties. In other words, the purpose of this attack is it was a symbolic attack. The Iran regime did it for 2 reasons. One is to show to its population, oh, we can be tough. We're not weak. After Israel's repeated assassinations of Iranian commanders, including the one on April 1st on the Iranian embassy complex. And then secondly, it was a signal to Israel, which is, don't come at us again. Don't think about these assassinations because we might have to strike you even harder next time. Now, what you're asking is, what does Israel do next? I can't predict that entirely, but I think we can say at this point that a direct Israeli attack on Iran is very unlikely. When Benjamin Netanyahu proposed this in 2012, the Israeli military and intelligence establishment shut it down. 12 years later, Joe Biden told Netanyahu firmly, if you attack Iran directly, we won't support this. So a line has been drawn. I think the immediate question here is, does Israel continue to carry out the assassinations in Syria, albeit not on Iranian embassy territory? Do they carry out targeted assassinations of Hezbollah officials? And do they pursue covert operations to weaken Iran's military? If they pursue all of those operations, it still means that we have to be holding our breaths because there could be an accidental move to a direct conflict, but it avoids that direct confrontation immediately that we're worried about.
Okay, but let me ask you another follow-up question before we let you go. Iran has said that the matter can be deemed concluded. However, should the Israeli regime make another mistake, Iran's response will be considerably more severe. And at the United Nations, Iran has actually said we have no intention of engaging in conflict with the US. But Iran will use its inherent right to respond proportionately should the US initiate a military operation against us. So the point really is that it seems like nobody really wants an escalation. As far as Israel is concerned, it seems to be pretty much done. Like you said, it sent out this message, maybe to its domestic constituency and the international community, that it's exacted retribution, so it's not seen as a weak regime. President Biden has already told Netanyahu, don't take this any further. Let's end it here. We're not going to support you in a counteroffensive. The worry now is that even as country after country exhorts both sides to exercise restraint and not allow an escalation, and this includes G7 leaders, the worry is that Netanyahu seems to be hell-bent on prolonging the war that he started 6 months ago. It's been going on already in Gaza for over 6 months. And now it looks like Israel has the appetite to expand this conflict beyond the borders of Gaza. There have already been hints that they want to even proactively go after Hezbollah along the northern border. And now you have this situation where Iran and Israel seem to be engaged in a direct conflict. So the point is, Biden and everyone else telling Netanyahu enough is enough. Will it be enough to actually stop the man who many believe is actually fighting for his political survival and acting out of sheer desperation?
Netanyahu is thumping his chest. Iran's supreme leader is thumping his chest. They're both being alpha males posing at each other. But there are others who are there. There are others in the Israeli war cabinet. There are others in the Iranian leadership.
Very much, Professor Lucas.